In this video review, we talk about Feudum, which is a hardcore Eurogame. It is a Eurogame for Eurogamers that are really committed and devoted to their side of the hobby. They're not afraid of learning a very complex system. In fact, this is probably the most complex non-war game that I ever played. Definitely when it comes to games that are, about investing resources and farmers, trading things, buying with the merchants, I don't remember playing any game that even gets close to this. It's one big beast of a design, by which I said design, not just game. The game is big, but the design is bigger in terms of complexity of layers of moving parts. There's just a lot to it. So actually, without further ado, let me give you a very general, very partial, very incomplete introduction to the general ideas behind Feudum. Because if I were to teach you the entire game, it would probably easy peasy take 90 minutes or so. That's how long it took me to teach the game to my group. So, Feudum. The board for the game is very large and it is majestic. It is a real beauty. You could frame it, hang it on the wall, and I think you'd be pleased with the result. As the board for a game, however, there are also times where it is a little too pretty for its own good, especially when it comes to this central area here. The map is divided in two main sections. The area that represents the land that the people will be exploring, conquering, and where they develop their settlements, and then you have 6 guilds, 3 on this side and 3 on this side, and the guilds work in synergy with one another. In particular, there are resources that go from one guild to the one to its right, and for that purpose these two guilds count as adjacent and this guild counts as adjacent to that one, which is also right there. I mean, look at the beautiful symmetry, but maybe it would be more practical if there were 2 boards, one with the landscape and one with the 2 sections, maybe even as a circle or something like that. The central area also has a problem with being so pretty. First, let's talk about the good stuff. I mean, look how some of the functionality has been integrated aesthetically. This is the marker for the different epochs in the game, and it is in the rays of the sun. Here there is the military service track that looks like a series of projectiles that were launched by a catapult. Areas where you store sulfur that lets you store wine, looking like barrels. This, you could barely tell that this guild here is, is part of a game. But actually these beads, or this rosary here is where you place bead tokens. This is the main area of the game. Here where you see the circles, you will place tokens that represent different types of settlements. You may have an outpost, which may later be improved into a farm, which may then become a town, which may then become a feudum. And there are different types of feudum depending on the specialization that your feudum has. When the map becomes problematic is in defining the different areas. There are areas, there's an area which is sea and an area which is islands. It's hard to tell at a glance which one is which. The rulebook tells you that, but actually we missed that detail and it took us a while to figure that out. Where an area starts and where another one ends, when a region starts, another one ends, is not all that easy. And really the most problematic thing is the connections. Some connections are obvious, the roads, yes, hooray. But then you have these air connections here that look like lines of birds, very thematic, but not that easy to see. Then we have these little waves here that represent connections where the ships can go, and actually, so that means that this is a connection, I assume. Then the ship jumps over the river fall, and so different Thanks. Is the connection to that place? It's very close, but not right there. I guess not, but it's probably a connection to that place. And then you have not that easy to see. Do you see that? You see, you have that connection made only of little dots. What is that? Bubbles, mainly, maybe? Those bubbles represent a connection that you can only travel by using a submarine. So these connections are not all that clear, all that functional. And now looking through the camera, and somehow I see that it's easier to see the submarine connection, that the connection ship in real life, for some reason, when I look at the board directly, is the opposite. I can barely see the bubbles. So very beautiful map, but unfortunately not the most practical out there. Each player uses a set of influence tokens that mark your presence on the board. Influence tokens will be placed in locations, and each location can only have up to 3 influence tokens belonging to no more than 2 players. So if this is the situation, then a third player wouldn't be able to place a token there. The player that has 2 will be the ruler, and you mark that by placing a token, an influence token directly on the location, and the token of the other player will be, the game calls it the serf. I don't like that term very much, so I think of it as a farmer. Then you have these pawns. These pawns represent, again, they represent your agents on the board, but they also represent your temporary allegiance to certain guilds, which is, for example, the Farmers Guild, or the Merchants, the Monks, the Knights, then we have the Nobles and the Alchemists. And so if I place a pawn on the board like this, now I will have certain benefits from the Alchemist Guild, and I will be able to influence the Alchemist Guild. And the same if I place this one. Pawns, however, are hungry at the end of each turn. You need to feed them. You need to spend resources to feed them, otherwise they are removed from the board. And then you have some discs that are used for various functions, and super important, you have a set of 11 action cards. They are the heart of the game, and the mechanism behind them is very simple. It will take me less than a minute to explain to you, but boy, oh boy, that simple mechanic leads to then a lot of cases, sub-cases, different applications, moving parts, and that is when the game becomes dizzying. As for the easy part, at the beginning of each turn, each player selects four cards secretly and simultaneously. I select, for example, this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. Each player selects 4 cards secretly, and then starting with the first player, each player will play one, will execute the corresponding action, and you continue like this until all cards have been played. If you spend certain resources, you may have an extra card. If you spend extra resources, you may take 2 actions in a row instead of 1 every time that the game goes around. But this is the general idea. Super simple, but again, a lot of game effects, especially if you play the advanced game, which to me is almost like the full game. I mean, you need really the advanced game to get a sense of what the game does. And the advanced game, you can use also the effects that are described by the icons at the bottom of the card. In the standard game and in the advanced game, you always use the cards on top. Then in other cases, this action here will replace this one. That is, will give you a different way to do that one. It may be a secondary action, or it may be an action that is not combined with the main action, is an either or. I don't think I'm gonna go through every effect of every card, but I want to give you a sense of what you can do in the game. The easiest card to explain to me is this one, which is a ×2. That is, you play it later in a turn and you can repeat an action that was on one of the previous cards that you played. Sometimes you can do that for free, some of the times you have to pay resources, and there are some cards that have icons that will prevent you from repeating an action. Harvest, this is when you have control of a farm, and then you will simply collect resources, and you can simply collect resources and then they go directly on the farm in that area, and they can later be sent to the Farmers Guild, and the Farmers later will send it to the merchants, and they'll become available. Or you can choose to kind of like steal some money from the people, in which case, depending how much harvest you had, the number on top is the number of resources, which are wooden cubes that go on the farm, and the number at the bottom, the number of resources that you take directly, that you keep for yourself. Migrate, this is how you place cubes so that it spawns on the board. You need to pay a resource, and then you place that pawn from your personal area to the board, and you can choose the orientation, that is, you can choose the symbol that your pawn represents. We have the move, that seems pretty self-explanatory. The number of pawns that you have in play represents the number of movement points that you have. If this is my situation, I can move by 2. That means I can move each of them by 1, or one of them by 2 spaces. You move across connections, and depending on the vehicles that you have, you may be able to use air connections, water connections, underwater connections. The roads you can always use, but a lot of locations that you can only reach by using special connections. Also, there will be little cubes scattered on the board that are represent resources, and if you move, you can pilfer them. That is, you simply grab them. You grab them as you go. Improve. This is how you turn, for example, an outpost into a farm. You play this card, then you pay the corresponding resource. In this case, it will be wood. Of course, you need to rule the location. Why would you be improving somebody else's location? So say I pay a wood, and then that outpost becomes a nice little, nope, not a town, becomes a farm. And the same principle applies here with iron. I turn it into a farm into town, and then town into Feudum. A Feudum is a special location that will score you a lot of points, and it will give you a lot of special powers and abilities, but alas, also gives an obligation. Then you have to attack other people, otherwise you lose points. I don't know what kind of maniac your king is. As soon as your king takes notice of you, then he sends you out to murder people, but so be it. If you have a farmer in a location, that wouldn't be that one. Suppose it is there, and then somebody else is ruling that location. If you have a farmer, you can tend the land. During the game, you will acquire these tiles when you are improving a location, and you can use them as a wild resource to pay for any other cost, or you can turn it to the other side, and then it turns into a type of land that will produce resources for you. And so that improve action, if you want, instead of using it to use it to improve the location itself, you can turn it into, I don't know, I like this one, and to this location here. And now my farmer serf there is doing that thing instead. Where are the action cards? Oh, here we are. That's for the improve. Tax. If you control a city, you can get money, and if you have a knight in play, oh, I do happen to have it, hooray, then you also gain an influence. It's an action that I like very much, because influence is super important. Explore. If you control an outpost, then you can draw 2 royal writ cards. These are special cards. They work in different ways. Some will give you points at the end of the game. Some will give you an advantage in combat. A lot of icons that you need to become familiar with. Also, as you can see, some have this empty space here. That means before you can actually benefit from them, you need to gain one of these tokens and place it there. You need the stamp of approval, whereas other cards come already ready to be played. And there are ways of getting extra cards to look at, because you draw 2 and you choose 1, and here you get extra cards, so you get a better selection. Influence. You place influence on the board everywhere you have your pawns, so that is neat. Also, if you have allegiance with the whatchamacallit, with the merchants, you have an advantage there. Then conquer and defense. Defense is easy. If you think you're gonna be attacked, you play the defense card, and it gives you a frankly quite modest modifier in defense. I would expect a card. Actions are very important. You get usually 4 per turn, so spending an entire one to get a small bonus doesn't seem all that exciting. Conquer is when you attack other people. I'm not even getting into the idea of how you do it because it takes too long to explain. The idea is that resources that you have will produce attack points or combat points, and the attacker needs to pile up more attack points than you have in defense. They can come from pawns, they can come from feudums, they can come from these cute monsters that people may take control of. They may come from the royal raid cards, and that's how you do it. And when you control a resource, of course, you will damage the opponent and you will collect victory points. Very important. Basically, you're doing all of these things to trigger game effects that will give you victory points, and that's what the game is about. And that completes our cards. Oh no, of course, actually there is the most important one. Oh, first the harvest one. Oh, we talked about that one, I believe. And then we have the guild one. The guild, you interact with one of the 6 guilds. Then the type of action you can do depends on your position in the guild. Each guild will have a leader and a second in command. There's like a leader, guild leader or something like that, and a journeyman. Depending on how much representation you have, certain things you do on the board will give you influence there, and so a player will be first player there, another player will be second player there, and then everybody else is just generic players. So there will be an action in each guild, which is called trading with the guild, that anybody can take, no matter what their position is. Then there is an action that only the journeyman can take, which is to pull resources from the guild to the left into the guild itself, and then the push that only the leader of the guild can perform, which is actually to push resources out. And usually doing these things will allow you to score victory points. Just to give you an example, if, for example, I am playing that card and I decide to interact with the merchant guilds, then I can always use this action, the action that you see at the bottom in a gray space. That is the trade action that anybody can always use. So I can pay 3. I can play 3 shillings. I can pay shillings, this is the currency in the game, to buy resources. There will be cubes here, and the price of that resource is the one indicated there. As you can see, usually because of scarcity, the things are, you will want to buy them from right to left because they cost less, and so when there's a little bit of scarcity, the prices go up. And here we have saltpeter, sulfur, iron, wood, and apples, well, and food. So that is the trade action that anybody can take. And then there's a procedure of who gets the money. It's not that easy. I'll skip that. The pull action, the pull action will allow you to take cubes that are from here and place them here, and you're trying to fill up rows or columns, and you'll score a point for that. So it's a little bit of an extra puzzle there based on which resources are here. That means if you want to score here, maybe you'll take an action that sends resources here, then you'll pull them there. But in the middle, maybe somebody has altered the power relationship inside the guild, and because of that, now you cannot take that action anymore. So you have to protect your status. So a lot to think about. So, but that is for the pull action. And for the push action, if you're the leader of the guild, you take a number of resources and you push them into the next guild, which is the Alchemist Guild. You place those cubes in these spaces here. You score points for completing different areas of different shelves or containers that the alchemist keeps to build stuff, and then the alchemist will use those to to build vehicles, so there will be some available at the beginning of the game, and then more that can be built during the game. So, but this is the general idea. When you interact with the farmer, you can send materials there, and then you get food, money possibly. And that's for the main idea. And again, they can go there and fill up those rows. Here you buy stuff and you interact with this mini board here. Here again, you can pull stuff into it. As for the trade action, you're paying 3 shilling to buy one of those vehicles, which will allow you to move in different places. If, for example, I have that ship, then I am here, suppose, and I want to go there, then I have that ship, I place it there, and now, whee, I can move in different places. And suppose that I get here, then I can, and if I have movement points, I can keep moving, but I leave the ship there, and somebody else may use it if they are there and they are so inclined. So the alchemist, again, is where you score points by filling up areas, and you can also buy stuff. You can also send resources to the next guild. Basically, the alchemist, if you are using the alchemist action, you can actually then spend those resources to build the things that you see indicated here. Again, everybody can buy, only the boss of the guild can build stuff. And also one of the things that you can build is these kegs of gunpowder that are then sent to the Knights Guild, where you will place influence tokens. This is the main source of influence tokens. There is a way to store them, there is a way to stock the various lines, and there is a way to score them. I don't even want to get there because it gets really complicated. Then, but that's your main source, really. You pay shillings to take influence pawns from this area. And again, that means you need a chain of effects to make sure that there are pawns in that area to start with. Here, this is the Nobles Guild. There will be these tokens here. This is where you, when you're trading, you pay shillings to buy these tokens that are used to activate game effects. Also, you're trying to complete, again, rows or columns, and that scores you victory points. These are double-sided, on the other side, they are rosary beads. No separation of church and state here. They are one and the same. They are quite literally two sides of the same token. There will be a number of rosary tokens here, and if you can look carefully enough, you will see that there are numbers printed on them. Again, very pretty, very thematic, but not all that easy to see. Maybe you're seeing them here like no problem, but imagine sitting on the other side of the board. Same thing, you may remember the Merchants Guild. Seeing the prizes from the other side of the board is very tough. They're just some small stuff there. Here, again, you can pull stuff into it. You can push stuff, and in this case, the next guild that you're pushing resources into is the Farmers Guild. So when the monks pray for the farmer, there's gonna be better harvest. You place the rosary beads on the chicken. Don't ask. I just have no flipping idea. So you place the rosary beads on the chicken, and we'll leave it at that. Or if you are taking the action that there is here, then you, with these tokens that give you bonuses, you will take the highest bonus and the lowest, 2 and 4. You give them to another player who places them in their hands, one per hand, and then you select one, and the one that you selected is the one that you get. Oh darn, I got the +2 and not the +4. And this is the general idea. So you continue like this, you select your actions, you activate your cards, you perform your actions, you acquire resources, spend resources, go crazy interacting with the guilds and making sure that you're able to do the correct interactions. And then when you improve locations, you will get to draw tiles from one of these stacks. There is a stack for each type of terrain. As you can see, there's one for the desert, one for the island. This is the one for the desert. This is the one for the badlands, the mountains. So suppose that I improve something in the mountains, then I take this one, which remember may give me stuff if I build it, or I can use it as a wild. Also, now I'm making the next epoch's tiles visible. When a certain number of tiles belonging to the next epoch are visible, you trigger that epoch. So for example, here we would be triggering the second epoch, then we move that marker there. There is a procedure that needs to be performed to refill the board, adding new resources, other type of things. Another thing that also is important from one epoch to the next is that the value, the number of points that you score for improving things changes. But this is the general idea, or I should say, this is the general idea of the tip of the iceberg, because again, then there are just so many other rules and sub-rules and things that if you're already confused now, I don't know. There's still a lot to go. So I already praised the components, very beautiful, and complain about them, not always very practical, in my main video. Now, to talk about the design, let me preface by saying that I like this game a lot. As a design, it almost feels like an experimental game, like let's see what can I get away with, and yet there are many mechanics, a ton of mechanics, but they're not piled up one on top of the other. It's not like, well wait, there is one more and we're gonna add that one. They really are connected to one another. They really are moving parts of something that feels very organic. At the same time, this is not a game that I'm going to recommend to many people. There are just many logistical elements that need to be just right for you to be able to enjoy the game. The stars need to be right. And this is, of course, due to the very scary complexity of the game. We had a player that dropped off the game before it even started. At the end of the rules, she was like, nope, no, I can't. No, can do. After the game, I probably am the player of the group that liked it the most. Most of the people are like, yeah, I don't feel like I need to play this again, just too much. The entry point is a difficult one. The learning curve is super steep. Because you have 6 guilds, so that means 18 actions. Yeah, some of the actions are similar, like the push action of a guild is pretty much the same as the pull action of the next one, but the rewards may change. There may be little adjustments there. But then you have 11 cards with 22 effects or 22 variations of those effects and other procedures. So to conquer, to go from one epoch to the other, to control cities. There's just cities or locations in general. There's just so much to learn and absorb. That means you're gonna go through over an hour of rule explanation when you're teaching the game to someone else. And the first game is not going to be all that exciting for most people because it's going to be go through the motions, try actions kind of randomly to see what they do. By the end of the first game, you're going to start seeing the strategy, but of course it's too late to implement it then. And the first game will almost certainly for most people be determined by randomness, by the fact that actually people are acting without really knowing, grasping what they're doing. They will make some major mistakes. They will go in certain directions and find that they don't have the resources to get there. All their pawns are starved to death, and then other bad stuff happens. So pragmatically, practically, because that's very important. We buy games not just to play them in our dreams, but actually sitting around the table with our friends. There's a game that I liked. After the game, I would have loved to play it again. I would love to play it again in the near future, but I don't know when that's gonna happen. And because I pretty much need to find other people that may like it more than the people I played it with. And then we're gonna go through this entire process, at the end of which maybe somebody will say, yeah, I think I wanna play it again. So basically, there's a game night that you're sacrificing to the altar of the complexity of Feudum, just to train yourself and other people. And then the second game night is gonna be what this is supposed to be. So I think there's going to be a target that's fairly limited of people that are going to be able to enjoy for real, like actually bring it to the table from time to time and enjoy without having to go through this process. You need to have a very stable group. You meet with them every week or every couple of days. It's always them. They're all hardcore. They're all hardcore Eurogamers such as yourself, and they are willing to spend the night just learning about the game, and then from the moment on enjoying it. So it's just a very narrow situation that will allow you to enjoy the beauty of the design. I wish there was a solitaire option. Then I would be recommending it right away, because then you can just play whenever you want. Probably would need to be a solitaire option based on an app or an AI that is digital, so that you have the algorithm that takes care of a lot of the decision making. If it's an old school flowchart based AI, I think it's gonna be such a pain to implement it, to go through all the possible categories, that then it's not worth it. I really wish that somebody at some point will find a way for us to play Feudum solo. Then I think I would love it, and I would be able to love it more than I certainly will otherwise. Because then I could enjoy the things that I like, which are the openness, the open world system. This is like a Eurogame open world. Usually, if open worlds like fantasy, or you're an assassin or something, you go there and you fight a lot. Here, you really get the sense of a world in which there is an economy, and you have a sense of development and change over time, which to me is stronger than a lot of other civilization games, in which you may have very detailed technology trees. Oh, we learned pottery, now we invented writing. But of course, it feels a little bit scripted. Here, you really have an organic sense of places developing from outposts and getting better. Then people start moving in, and then the land around that farm now is tended, and it turns into something else, and then more people come in, and then other things happen, and you send things to the farmer sends the thing to the merchants, people buy that stuff, or that stuff is then purchased by the alchemist that makes machines, and people use those machines to travel to places, produce new resources, gain influence on another guild, and the alchemist gives gunpowder to the knights, and the knights, because of that, they gain influence, they gain the power to influence people. Think about it. That makes sense. More gunpowder. If you have a lot of gunpowder, people will take you more seriously. Maybe your argumentative style now is better. Your philosophical skills are better, but definitely you're more persuasive. So you really have this sense of every part connecting to one another. And in a sense, there's only one path to victory, which is victory points. On the other hand, there are so many ways of scoring points that you really have the sense of freedom. And yet, none of those ways of scoring points are easy to get there, to get to the point where you can actually score it. Because everything is tied together, everything is moved by another part of the machine and moves something else. Then you always have the sense that you are one or two steps behind. Oh, I'm gonna score there. Oh, wait a second, but I need that other thing. But to get there, I need to get control of that guild to do the action that will set me that up. So how do I do to control that guild? Oh, I got my friend Frank here. I need to get majority in that thing. So let me do those actions that will allow me to take majority. Oh, wait, but that's going to be a lot of pawns on the board. I need food to feed them. And so on and so forth. Basically, you will always act suboptimally, because if you try to get optimally, you're going to spend the entire game trying to perform one action. And since the players are doing other stuff and changing things around, you're not going to be able to do it. So you're always short of the resources that you would like to use. You will always feel like you don't have enough actions, and that is perfect. Now, if you were completely stuck, then of course you wouldn't be fun. But that sense that the design is like tantalizing you with like the delicious temptation of a reward, which is just there. If I could just get the one more action, one more frigging cube, it'd be there. That is what a good design does. It gives you rewards that feel attainable, and it gives you the means to get there if you're able to make the right decisions. So you really feel that the decision making process matters. It is rewarding, but it is challenging. It's just challenging to figure out how it works, so, the moving, the steps you need to take, and then of course the strategy is the second moment, how you take those steps efficiently and more efficiently than other people, while other people are taking steps that may be going against you. Somebody's buying those resources that you wanted to use with the next guild. So this kind of thing. I like the openness. I wouldn't even call it the decision tree here. It's the decision galaxy. As you can see, I really think this is a very, very fascinating design. Um, I like the replayability because in each game you're not gonna be able to do everything that can be done here, and again, that is fun. This game I wanna concentrate on influencing the knights and the farmers and the alchemist, and the other time I'll try with the farmers and the merchants, and maybe actually I can convince the monks to help the farmers. You won't be able to do everything that you can. That also means, however, that the first game that you play may feel a little bit underwhelming, because you did sit through my grueling session in which I was teaching you the game, and you suffered to learn about all of those things that you're not going to use. A lot of those you're not going to use, and maybe no one will use them, or somebody will use that action once per game, and that feels a little bit like a waste, unless again you're in that situation with a group that is then able and willing to play the game regularly, and then you get to explore different corners of this microcosm each game. It really feels like a microcosm. It's really a tight mini world in which things just interact with one another synergetically, organically. That to me is amazing. That is the achievement of this game. If only it was a little more playable. And I cannot get past the feeling that it would be possible to scale down the complexity a little bit, having, I don't know, 80% of what the game is now, 70%, cut down a third somehow, and you still get most of the sense of a micro world in which you're really controlling a civilization, and there is this ecosystem that you interact with, that you influence, that affects you. It will still have this beauty of working with this game of moving resources, this mini world of moving resources. I just can't get past the feeling that 4 guilds probably would be enough. Maybe you could do without the nobles and the monks. They don't seem to be the ones that attract as much attention. Although then maybe there will be a game where somebody does only those and they score a ton of points, maybe because of all the cards that they're able to put seals on, that kind of stuff. So maybe could be scaled down, but as is, it is a fine design with components a little too beautiful for their own good. But it's a fine design that I don't know that many people will be inclined to learn and to play enough to become proficient with this, when you can really enjoy the game at its fullest. Feudum, it is a really strong design, really an achievement in game design, almost an experiment, and as an experimental design, almost as avant-garde, of course, then is not something that will be enjoyed by the large masses out there. So Feudum, it is a really remarkable design. I think is a strong design, but it really requires a lot of work. You have to put a lot of work in it to be able to play to start with, and then to be able to enjoy it. If you think you have the strength, and so do your friends, because the game is not solo friendly as is, well, if you think you had that strength and so does your group, then give a try to Feudum. Who knows? Maybe it'll be your favorite Euro game. I don't know. Maybe it's gonna be hard to go back after you try this one. It's the advanced squad leader of Euro games. So Feudum. A really strong design, not for everybody, and for those who want to play it, there's going to be a lot of work to be able to enjoy it.